Joining us now from Brussels is Sebastian Dullien. He's a senior policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. With us from London is the economist and author Philippe Legrain. And from Athens, we're joined by Nick Malkoutzis. He's the deputy editor, Kathy Marini, English, Greece's only English language daily newspaper. Gentlemen, thanks to all of you for joining us. Nick, let me start with you. We have Syriza, which is a left-wing party now in charge in Greece. It's governing in coalition with a smaller party, but they're all on the same page politically. How big a deal is this for Greece?
Well, clearly this is a departure from what we've had over the last few years. The new coalition government, as you mentioned, they're from two opposite sides of the political spectrum, but they agree on one thing, and that's that they want to end the bailout program. And essentially what we've had in Greece over the last few years is a fixed process by which Greece and its troika of lenders, the European Commission, the IMF and the ECB, the European Central Bank, get together and agree a program of reforms and fiscal targets, lend Greece money to pay off its existing debt. Now, this government wants to go around it a completely different way. They say we'll put forward our own program of reforms, focusing mainly on tax evasion, cutting down tax evasion, on fighting corruption and other structural reforms. But instead of giving us money to pay off the debt, we want you to reduce our debt, lower our fiscal targets and give our economy room to breathe. So it's a completely different approach, and as you've seen over the first few days, there has been a lot of misunderstanding, misconceptions about what each side wants to do and can do.
Philippe, the Greek finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis, he's just held a meeting in London with his United Kingdom counterpart, George Osborne, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Osborne came out of that meeting and said that, and these were his words, the standoff between Greece and the Eurozone is the greatest threat to the global economy. Do you believe that to be the case?
I think he's guilty of exaggeration. Certainly, there is the potential for the showdown between the new Syriza government and Eurozone authorities to go terribly wrong. And there is a small probability that Greece might even end up outside the euro with unpredictable consequences for the rest of the currency union. But I think while there's a lot of bluster on both sides, that both have an incentive to reach an agreement. Both sides want Greece to stay in the euro, and if Greece were forced out, Germany and other EU creditors would lose all the money they've lent to Greece, most likely. Since it's clear that Greece cannot pay all of it back, there is scope for an agreement whereby Greece pays some of it back. Now, is it possible that there might be accidents on either side? Of course. Are there big obstacles, political and otherwise, to achieving a deal? Yes, indeed. But I think that George Osborne is exaggerating the seriousness of the situation.
Okay, let's go to Sebastian in Brussels. Sebastian, the Guardian newspaper says that Greece is on a collision course with Europe, with Brussels, and it makes the point that Germany has already taken a hardline stance, and Germany is saying, look, we want the money paid back. Is Greece on a collision course?
I mean, Greece is clearly on a collision course with Germany, maybe with Brussels, and probably less so with the rest of Europe. I mean, what we have seen in the past month or weeks is already that not everyone is very happy with the austerity path the Germans have pushed for. And frankly, I mean, the austerity policies the Germans have prescribed, they have failed economically and they have failed politically. If we look back, it was promised that Greece would turn around pretty quickly if it passed, well, budget cuts. And they did pass budget cuts, but the recession became deeper and deeper. By now, output has fallen by 25%. And, well, austerity has not worked much better in the rest of the Eurozone. And there is a growing political resistance against this austerity path. So the Greek issue is threatening to, well, divide the Eurozone into two. And the Germans seem or have the feeling that they are losing their allies here.
So, Nick, here we have a situation where Greece has, in fact, taken some of that very bitter medicine. But at this stage, there could be a long and bruising fight with Europe here. And could one of the consequences of that be that Greece actually, it could cost Greece more in the long term?
Well, I think, to be honest, there isn't really time for a long and bruising fight. It has to be resolved fairly quickly. Greece doesn't have a lot of money, it can't keep paying its debts on its own. It has repayments, IMF repayments in March, it has ECB repayments, bonds to repay in the summer, so there needs to be some solution, first in the short term, to ensure that liquidity keeps flowing to Greek banks, and then perhaps before the summer in order to ensure that the funding is placed to pay those bonds. So I think whatever will have to happen fairly quickly. It's just a question at this point of this new government trying to communicate its ideas over these next few days and seeing what scope there is for a compromise in the weeks to come.
Right, Philippe, and we have Germany saying that, look, the debt that Greece is in is bearable. It can pay back its debt.
Oh, that's complete and utter nonsense. I mean, its debts are 175% of GDP, and while it's true that the nominal interest rates on them are rather low, they're much higher in real terms given the fact that Greece is in deflation. The idea that Greece can pay back its debts is based on unrealistic assumptions about future growth, and indeed unrealistic assumptions about EU creditors' willingness to continue refinancing those loans, and Greek voters' willingness to put up with unending misery to make huge payments to hated foreign creditors. So it's pretty clear that Greece needs debt relief. Outside the Eurozone, there is a broad consensus that that's the case. It's only within the Eurozone that policymakers are insisting otherwise.
Sebastian, as we just heard from Nick a few minutes ago, Greece is in negotiation with what is called the European Troika. Those are the three institutions that are overseeing the loans. That's the European Central Bank, the European Commission, and the IMF. Can Greece afford to ignore the Troika?
Well, I mean, the question is, can the Eurozone afford to ignore Greece at this point? And my fear is that in Berlin, some people believe they can, or at least they can, drive a hard line here. But the problem is, if it comes to an accident and Greece was eventually to leave the Eurozone, there is the danger that speculators at least at once get the feeling that also Spain might leave the Eurozone or Italy, and they might speculate against these countries, and we then could have huge capital outflows which could break the Eurozone apart. And so there are huge risks involved on both sides here, and well, I mean, Greece certainly would have a pretty hard time if they ignored the Troika and could not pay their bills, but the rest would be dragged down into the crisis.
We need to take a break right now. More on Greece's economic woes and the country's future when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat.